Alright, well, UFC 2024 is about to come to an end, and I've decided to give my personal takes on the best and worst fights of the entire year. Now, I'm going to have a few qualifications that are required. I know a lot of people, when they're looking at fights, they're typically looking at, impressive finishes and all that other stuff. I'm going to go based off of fights that went to the scorecards. Now, I'm going to be doing two different versions. There's going to be the the 3 rounds for fight of the year, and then there will be the 5 rounds of the fight of the year. And the same thing goes with the worst fights of the year. There's going to be a 3-round category and a 5-round category. But with all that being said, I'm going to go through the worst fights of the year, and I'm going to be starting with the 3-rounder here. And I personally, there's been some stinkers, don't get me wrong. There's been some stinkers this year, but me personally, I think the worst fight of the year is Robelis Despain, Waldo Cortez. And I kind of don't think it's that close when it comes to worst fight 3-rounders. Now, there are stinkers, like I said before, but I think when we're looking at stinkers, this one's top of the ladder, because the main problem with this is Waldo Cortez gets signed at the beginning of the year, 36 years old. Yeah, I know, a little bit of a weird age for a prospect in the UFC. However, gold medalist, bronze medalist, whatever it is for Taekwondo, people are saying like, oh, he's the next big thing. This guy's going to be the next thing at heavyweight. How many times have we heard that? Romanov, there's a few times where that's been said. But obviously, a lot of people see this guy's stature, 6'7", has like double the reach of Alexander Volkov, same height as Volkov somehow. He is just a Taekwondo background version, I guess. Pretty long Taekwondo career, as far as I've seen on this guy, and he's a legit heavyweight. He's not a fat, overweight heavyweight, and that's kind of why I rate this as one of the worst, because this is really just like, you're in shape, you're fit, you have the reach advantage in every single fight for the next of your life, and you are going to be the taller opponent until you get to the highest level. Finishing Josh Perzian within 20 seconds is kind of impressive. Not the most impressive, of course, right? Because it is heavyweight at the end of the day. But at least it's like hype. We're like, okay, this guy might be able to be something. Then he fights Waldo Cortez. And Waldo Cortez, if you don't know, kind of sucks. He made it really close with Andrei Arlovsky this year, which is like, ugh, you don't like seeing that. You really don't want to make it close with Andrei Arlovsky, obviously the 65-year-old man this year. That's not a good win, not only because it's old man Arlovsky, but it's also, arguably Arlovsky won that fight, and just overall, Waldo Cortez just isn't really that great. He's lost to Marcos Rogério de Lima, which is in the rankings currently now, I believe. If we scroll over here and look at heavyweight, which he's actually, wow, just above. I actually didn't know that. But regardless, I do think Salsa Boy kind of spoiled the hype train of Robelis Despain. And I think this is like the worst fraud checking we got this year. There's been a lot of fraud checking, don't get me wrong. I think this one's the worst one. We had a really nice prospect going to heavyweight, has every single genetic advantage in the highest weight class possible, and he still fumbles the bag by getting laid on for 3 rounds straight. It's just the most disappointing performance you could ever have as a prospect. It's one thing to have a Mike Malott get finished in the final 10 seconds of the fight, right? But Mike Malott's not really a gifted welterweight or whatever, right? Like, Mike Malott is, at the end of the day, just like a regular-ass welterweight. It's another thing to have, like, Javid Basharat, or the other Basharat. I can't remember the other one. It's one thing to have those Basharat brothers lose as well to, like, an Ayman Zahabi or whatever. But at least those are, like, they're losing to actual decent-level comp. And at the end of the day, they are, like, in their divisions for a reason, If you're bantamweight, it's because you're short, you don't really have the genetic advantages, right? Or you're sacrificing a lot of muscle mass. This is a case where Robelis Despain is quite literally the peak of human physique, and he can't do anything to anyone who can shoot a fucking takedown. And not only was that showcased in his last fight against Austin Lane, this was just like one of the worst performances I think I've ever seen. Arguably, Austin Lane versus Robelis Despain could be worse, but I think the Waldo Cortez Acosta is probably the worst one. The mega stinker, if you will, just because at this time it's like Robelis, he should be something. I know a lot of people hopped off the train really early, and some people weren't sold, like We Want Picks Nation. I don't think they were sold on Robelis being that big of a boy. But regardless, this is like, you have everything you could possibly want except for maybe age. And when it comes to age, it's like, oh, maybe he gets chinned, right? He doesn't get chinned. He gets fraud checked by getting out-grappled by Waldo Cortez's terrifying double legs. Absolutely monstrous double legs. Who's a guy who also doesn't know how to defend leg kicks. You know, Salsa Boy just isn't really high level. Like this, because heavyweight only has about 20 people and there's about 15 rankings, kind of makes sense why he's ranked, right? But it's also just like, how is Robelis, the gold medalist, all this other shit, 6'7", you know, insane reach, how is he this shit, you know? It's just crazy to think about, you know? It's absolutely insane. This is like a heavyweight John Jones stature, and it's like you just do nothing with your advantages in the cage at all. 0 IQ. You've had a combat career. What the fuck are you doing with your life? Anyways, that is the worst 3-rounder in my opinion. I think there's a few close ones, but I think this one's just a cut above the rest. And now the worst fight of 2024 for a 5-rounder. Again, this has to go to judges' scorecards, and typically I'm going to be valuing more of the narrative around the fight. Hence why Robelis Despain is kind of like the mega stinker here, because he is just supposed to be a prospect. A lot of fraud checks this year. Robelis, I think, is kind of a cut above the rest because of his genetics, I guess we'll say. But moving on, we have the worst fight of 2024. That was a 5-rounder. I think it's none other than Leon Edwards, Belal Muhammad. I'm sure no one's surprised by this. Leon Edwards, even before this fight, yeah, he lost a lot of steam off the Colby Covington win, but at least he dominated clear 4 rounds to 1. Even arguably 5 rounds. Kamaru Usman, he also kind of dominated 4 to 1. A little closer when you look upon it again, but beating Kamaru Usman in welterweight during a Kamaru Usman era-ish is also another good thing to kind of have on the record. You know, even though Kamaru Usman's legacy is that great, all things considered. The main reason why is because Leon Edwards was on a killing spree of monstrous decisions here, right? Absolutely insane decision streak we got going on here, right? Of course, we had the eye poke and everything. But no doubt Leon Edwards had one of the biggest winning streaks, if you're including the no contest. And then just eventually fumbling the bag to the most ugly? No, I don't want to be too mean. Most, well, I don't even know what to say. The most Belal Muhammads of the division, you know? The most unsuspecting victor, you know? The guy who went to Gilbert Burns' decision with one arm, you know? The guy who TKO'd Sean Brady, you know? Yeah, the guy who laid on Wonder Boy, you know? Not really much else to really say about Mr. Belal Muhammad's record, but he is an impressive win streak of his own. In some sense, this is like the lightweight equivalent to if Oliveira was a decision fighter, and if Belal Muhammad was the sort of rising, streaking contender. You know, both of them were on a crazy winning streak, and this was like a winning streak for them all, I guess. You know. So, I do think this is the worst performance, mainly because of the winning streak, but it's also just like, if you watch the fight, it is just a shit fight to watch. It's not like, oh my god, Belal Muhammad on the feet is absolutely insane. Oh my god, Belal Muhammad's grappling is crazy. Leon Edwards gets dunked on his head, and then after that, in round 1, it's just like, Leon Edwards looks half asleep the whole fight. Some people are like, that's how he always looks. Not really. Most of the time, especially during the Usman, even in the final round of the second fight here, he had wide-eyed, almost like a wide-eyed Max. You know, Nate Diaz, he almost got finished is what it is. But regardless, in the Kamaru Usman fights, he looks locked in. You know, he looks wide-eyed in Colby Covington's fight, similar situation. Bilal Muhammad's fight, this guy literally had his eyes closed with Bilal Muhammad having his back, looking like he's about to fall asleep. Actually, one of the most embarrassing performances I think we've ever seen from a champion. You know, only thing more embarrassing than that would be pulling out of your first fight due to a little toe injury, guys. Am I right? Am I right, guys? No, I'm joking, obviously. But nah, it's just like you're getting Bilal Muhammad did in 2024. You know, I think that's just the worst performance. You know, I just think it's like two decision fighters, they meet, and it's a win by boring decision. You know, the only entertaining part about the whole fight was probably the last 10 seconds where Leon Edwards split open Bilal Muhammad's eye, almost causing a TKO at the end there. But Leon Edwards decided to fall asleep, go back into Bilal Muhammad's guard, and just kind of wait there until he lost. You know, it was just a disappointing fight. This is by far the worst performance I think I'd give out for 2024. There's a few stinkers, don't get me wrong. Edson Barbosa, Lerone Murphy, I thought was a stinker. Who else do we got here? We're talking 5-rounders. There's a few. You know, women fights are obviously disqualified from this category, mainly because I don't care. I don't watch them seriously. I do watch them, but I don't watch them seriously, thinking like, oh, I can't wait who the next streaking contender is. Don't really care. It's not my thing. But regardless, I do think this is the stinkiest performance of the 5-rounders this year, going all the way to decision. You know, we obviously had Fluffy Hernandez versus Michelle Pereira. That one was depressing to watch. But that one ended in a TKO, so that's why it's not really here. Otherwise, I'd probably put that one here. You know, but regardless, I do think this is the stinkiest of the performances for 5 rounds. Moving on to the great fights of the year, the greatest 3-rounders of the year. Now, this one is actually, I know a lot of people ragged on this year, right? But this one, in my opinion, is actually a lot closer than I think a lot of people are remembering. You know, there's been a few, you know, Mateusz Rebecki, you know, Orobai, you know. Some might say Sean Strickland versus DDP as the 5-rounder. You know, that one was competitively close, you know. Again, get a preface, it has to go to decision. I'm not talking about fighters that ended up getting a finish. And in my opinion, I think the 3-rounder does end up going to Esteban Ribovics, Daniel Zellhuber. Now, I do get some of the other arguments. This category is kind of like inflated because there are a lot of 3-rounders this year that went to decision that were pretty good scraps overall, all things considered. But I do think Esteban Ribovics versus Daniel Zellhuber was actually the fight of the year. Now, my problem with a fight like Rebecki Orobai, don't get me wrong, high pace, bloody, absolute scrap. Fraud checking, a guy who was on a unbeaten streak, that sort of situation. Completely understand why you would pick that. However, this Esteban Ribovics Daniel Zellhuber was a stand-up war for 5 rounds. And when I say war, I do mean war. This was literally Zellhuber constantly trying to get a finish until the very final moments where he was about to get finished. And Esteban Ribovics also constantly trying to hunt for a finish, while also not minding almost getting finished in a few moments here. And another reason why I think this fight stands out above the rest, not just because of the stand-up, these guys are young prospects in lightweight. You know, these guys are like future lightweight contenders, in my opinion, right? Like, these guys deserve to be in the top 15 once the old guard gets flushed out based on those two performances, or based on those performances, I should say, right? Zellhuber, a little bit of a bigger guy at 6'1" for the division. And then we have Esteban Ribovics. I think he's a really tall 5'10". I think he's closer to 5'8", personally. However, Esteban Ribovics, you can tell, was the shorter guy. You could tell had the slower, or not slower, but he had the shorter reach in this fight, and it definitely mattered. This was a perfect sniper on the feet type style versus a perfect short but explosive type of dude. Kind of like a Joaquin Buckley versus like a Neil Magny, if you will, type situation, right? Where you have a super long, reachy guy, Or like an Adesanya, I guess is a better example, right? Like this is like an Adesanya style, and this is more like a Joaquin Buckley explode into your face type style, right? And I really appreciate the fact that this fight was purely stand-up. I don't think there was any takedowns. If there are, this fight was so good, I forgot about them. There was massive blood from both fighters, and both were just swinging heat constantly, you know? Obviously, I do think these guys do go far in the division, and I did get my prediction wrong, so if anything, I'm even more biased against this fight, because it kind of pisses me off that I got this prediction wrong, picking Daniel Zellhuber. But regardless, I thought it was a sick fight, and I thought both guys wanted to finish. The only thing that kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth is the way Zellhuber was kind of handling the loss. It kind of seemed like Zellhuber wasn't respecting Esteban after receiving that split decision loss, but I think it's fair that he lost that fight, and I think Esteban definitely deserved the win there. Now, moving on to the 5-round main event / co-main event of Fight Card's Fight of the Year for 2024. Now, there are a few contenders, but if we're talking about going to decision, you know, there is like the Sean Strickland versus DDP. There is the Steve Erceg versus Pantoja, I guess, right? But I think this one's kind of a sleeper fight for the year. Now, when it comes to the 5-round main events, I will say for 5-round main events, we kind of got shafted this year. Wasn't really the craziest. In my opinion, the best 5-round fight of the year is Tatsuro Taira versus Brandon Royval. Now, I know what you're thinking, they're flyweights. I really enjoy flyweights, so this is obviously a bias from me. But I think this fight was sick because not only fighting Brandon Royval, this is a 16-0 contender, same 16-0 contender, same record as Ilia Topuria, I might add. But he was coming off impressive fights before Alex Perez TKO, even though it was a knee injury, is what it is. All right, beating Carlos Hernandez, that's a sick win to have. And then he gets finally a jump up in the rankings, and he fights Brandon Royval. This fight was extremely close. I do think Brandon Royval won. I did pick Brandon Royval, so I'm obviously biased. However, this was bell-to-bell, a high-paced flyweight fight. People sleep on flyweight fights, and I'll continue saying it. I do think flyweight is one of the more entertaining divisions. People are just like, but it's the same people fighting over and over again. Yeah, it's because everyone in flyweight is just good. And this was the highest level flyweight match probably this year, right? Other than Pantoja getting that finish on Kaya Sakura. But, I mean, obviously Kaya Sakura isn't high level comp. Especially now that he's, ranked 14th? Where is he? That's pound for pound. Where is he? Yeah, 14th, right? Not really putting too much weight into that, right? But Brandon Royval is a top dog, and he's been a top dog. Tatsuro Taira is probably the best-looking flyweight prospect, and he wasn't able to make it through. Way better looking than Kaya Sakura as far as Japan goes. So, just saying, right? But this was a high-paced fight, bell-to-bell. Now, it was not a just striking war like a Daniel Zellhuber Esteban Ribovics, and as you know, stand-up fights are obviously what are going to win fights of the year. Grappling matches are boring, shit, no one really likes them. But the grappling here, at least with a Tatsuro Taira Brandon Royval, was at least high-paced. It was at least entertaining to watch. You got to see a lot of high-level scrambles, almost like a Corey Sandhagen scrambles, but with striking on level with a, honestly, Max Holloway at this point. Like, yes or no? I mean, you know, Brandon Royval does have really good striking. It's just when he's against grapplers, he can't strike as much, right? But if you stand up with him, like he showed against Brandon Moreno, he will just box the fuck out of your face, and he will keep it close on the feet with Tatsuro Taira. You know, there's a few moments where these guys were wobbled, a few moments where they were getting close, both getting submissions, you know, and a few moments where we had those, like, Pantoja-esque Kaya Sakura moments where Tatsuro Taira would have the back, and he's kind of just waiting for Royval to, like, make a big mistake. And there's a few moments where you're like, oh shit, Brandon Royval just fucked up. And then they just do an insane scramble, and Brandon Royval pops his head out, and you're like, oh shit, now we're on the feet, you know? So I thought bell-to-bell, this fight was very entertaining. I get it if you're a flyweight hater. However, I think if you look under a more of a bird's eye view on top of all the fights this year, I do think Brandon Royval, Tatsuro Taira is first place in terms of fight of the year that went to decision, you know? And while there are a few close, I do think that this one's just a cut above the rest, right? You know, outside of these ones, there's not, like, the craziest amount of events, right? Like, we're looking at, I mean, this is before, keep in mind, I'm recording this before Colby Buckley, right? This one could be a stinker, or one of the most entertaining decisions ever, right? But regardless, you know, we had Shavkat Ian Gary. That's not getting contender for anything. I mean, that could have been a stinker, to be honest, but, you know, I think the Bilal Leon is kind of like the big stinker, especially at the level it was. You know, that's something we got to consider, but I'm more or less looking for entertainment value and pace value in terms of the good fights. I'm not really looking at, you know, entertainment value when we're looking at the shit fights. I'm kind of looking at the level of fight, the level of opponents we're talking about, and the sort of aura around them, you know? Leon Edwards kind of had the aura like he could probably be champion for a while, especially if Bilal Muhammad was challenging him. Anyone who's saying, well, Bilal was obviously going to beat him, there was no reason to think that whatsoever. Bilal Muhammad was coming off injuries. Bilal Muhammad was also losing the fight in the Leon Bilal won. If you picked Bilal Muhammad against Leon Edwards, I'm not going to go that far, but I will say you probably were just picking him because, oh, grappling good, striking bad. And that's pretty much why. Or you were relying on Leon Edwards to cheat during the fight and getting point deductions, right? Shit like that, when Bilal was the one who ended up cheating by dunking him on his head, which is illegal in UFC, but, you know, no one counts that. But yeah, this year was kind of a stinker, not gonna lie, right? When we're looking at decisions. Even this Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, that wasn't that entertaining, right? We had Brandon Moreno, Amir Albazi, that was a dog shit fight. We had... yeah, that happened. Yeah. Overall, nothing like crazy this whole year other than really a Brandon Royval, Tatsuro Taira, if we're looking at a 5-round decision, right? You know, there's just, like, really nothing as we're going through here. But I've gone through the list. There's not really anything that kind of, like, wow, that was really good, right? But when I think of Brandon Royval, Tatsuro Taira, I'm like, damn, that was a really close fight, and that was a sick fight to watch, you know? Same thing when I think about this fight. There's a lot of fights that I think a lot of people would pick for fight of the year that I'm just like, wasn't that good, right? So yeah, that's pretty much my picks for fight of the year. This is what I truly believe should have been fights of the year. I don't know what are fights of the year. And then obviously the worst fights of the year when we're looking at both the 3-round category and the 5-round category. But yeah, with all that being said, I'm a little under the weather, as you probably could tell by my voice if you watch my videos. If you don't know, I daily upload. If you're curious about MMA content and you're looking for the new empire on the scene, right? But I pretty much post anything I'm passionate about. I'm not just MMA, but, you know, we'll see. Regardless, I want to thank you for watching, making it all the way to the end of this video, and as always, I hope you have a good day.